This is the story of Eleanor Grace, 68 years old, a widow for nearly a decade. She lives in a small clapboard house at the edge of Cedar Falls, Iowa, the kind of town where time moves slower and memories hang in the air like the scent of rain after a storm. To her neighbors, Eleanor is quiet, the polite widow with the roses. She tends her garden every morning, keeps her curtains drawn by dusk, and waves softly when people pass by. But what they don't see is the old wooden desk upstairs and the locked drawer that's been closed for 40 years. It was a cold October afternoon when she decided to finally open it. The wind outside pressed against the windows, and the sky had that heavy gray tint that comes before winter. She sat down slowly, her hands trembling as she reached for the tiny brass key. The drawer creaked open. Inside were old envelopes, yellowed photographs, and one unsealed letter resting on top of a stack of time. The letter was addressed in her own handwriting. To Michael, her late husband's name. For 40 years, she had never told anyone about that letter. Not her pastor, not her sister, not even her husband when he was alive. Because the letter wasn't written for him to read. It was written for her to forget. She unfolded it carefully. The ink had faded, but her words still cut as sharply as the day she wrote them. Michael, it began. I don't know if I'll have the courage to ever give this to you, but I need to say what I can't say out loud. I love you, but I also hate what we've become. She paused, her throat tightening. In the fireplace, the logs crackled faintly, echoing the sound of a memory she'd buried long ago, the night she almost left him. They were young then, just married, and the world still smelled of promise and paint from their new home. But somewhere between the laughter and the years, life had turned into silence. Michael was a good man, a steady man, but steady can sometimes turn into stone. He stopped talking about dreams. He stopped noticing the small things, like the way she hummed when she cooked, or the way she always left the porch light on for him. She tried to reach him. Letters became arguments, arguments became silence. And then came the other letter. It arrived one summer evening, no return address, just her name written neatly in blue ink. The words inside shattered her world. Eleanor, I know this will hurt, but you deserve the truth. Michael has been seeing someone from the factory. Her name is Clara. She remembered that night vividly. The kitchen light flickered as she read the words over and over, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely breathe. But when Michael came home, she didn't confront him. She simply placed the letter in the drawer and locked it away. And then she wrote her own, the one she now held trembling in her hands. Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered the words aloud 40 years too late. I forgive you, even if you never asked me to. Downstairs, the clock struck 5. The sound echoed through the empty house, a soft reminder that time never really stops. She folded the letter again, her fingers tracing the edges of her past. Outside, a car door closed. She looked out the window and saw a young woman walking up the path, someone she didn't recognize, carrying a small brown envelope in her hand. Eleanor froze. The girl smiled faintly through the glass and mouthed a name that sent a chill through her chest. Clara. 40 years of silence were about to end.
The knock on the door was soft, almost polite, but to Eleanor, it sounded like the past itself had come knocking. She hesitated, still clutching the old letter in her hand. The young woman outside shifted nervously, holding that brown envelope close to her chest. Finally, Eleanor opened the door. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice gentle but guarded. "Mrs. Grace?" the girl asked. "My name's Emily. Emily Harper. I think you might have known my mother, Clara." Eleanor's breath caught. The name felt like a ghost stepping into daylight. Clara, the woman from the letter, the one she had never met but had spent half her life trying not to hate. She nodded faintly. Yes, I knew who she was. Emily smiled shyly and held out the envelope. "She passed away last spring. I was going through her things and found this. It's addressed to you. She told me once that she regretted something she'd done when she was young, something that hurt another woman deeply." Eleanor's hands trembled as she took the envelope. It was yellowed, fragile, and sealed with a single piece of faded tape. The handwriting was neat, careful, and instantly familiar. "Would you like to come in?" Eleanor asked softly. Emily nodded, stepping inside. The scent of lavender and old books filled the room. She looked around, photographs on the mantel, a wedding portrait, two smiling faces frozen in time. "That's your husband?" Emily asked. "Yes," Eleanor said quietly. "That's Michael." They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Eleanor had once eaten in silence, wondering what her husband was doing when he wasn't home. She placed Clara's envelope beside her teacup, staring at it as if it might burst into flames. "Would you mind if I read it?" she asked, her voice trembling. Emily shook her head. "That's why I brought it." Eleanor broke the seal. The paper inside was thin, the ink faded but legible. She began to read aloud. "Eleanor, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect understanding. I only want you to know that I loved him too, but I never meant to take him from you." The words hung in the air like smoke. "He told me once that he'd broken something precious. He cried when he said your name. He said he didn't deserve to be forgiven, but that he hoped one day you'd find peace." Her throat tightened. She looked up at Emily, who sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. "There's more," she whispered. "I ended things with him before you ever found out. He came to me once more after that, only once. He said he wanted to fix what he'd broken. I never saw him again." Eleanor's tears fell softly onto the paper. For 40 years, she'd carried anger, shame, and questions. Now, all she felt was exhaustion, the kind that comes from finally setting down something heavy. "I don't hate her anymore," she said quietly. "I thought I did, but I don't." Emily reached across the table and gently held her hand. "She talked about you sometimes, said you were the woman she wished she could have been." "That's not true," Eleanor murmured. "We were just women, trying to be loved." They sat in silence for a long time, 2 generations connected by a single act of betrayal and the fragile thread of understanding. Outside, rain began to fall, soft, steady, cleansing. When Emily finally left, she hugged Eleanor tightly and whispered, "She wanted you to know she was sorry." Eleanor nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I know," she whispered, "and I forgive her." After Emily drove away, Eleanor sat by the window, the 2 letters spread out before her, hers and Clara's, 2 sides of the same heartbreak, written decades apart but speaking the same truth. "Forgiveness," she murmured, "comes too late for the living, but maybe not for the soul." That night, she placed both letters into a small tin box and carried it to the garden behind her house. The rain had stopped. The air smelled of earth and memory. She buried the box beneath the rose bushes, whispering softly, "Rest now, both of you." As she stood up, she saw something shimmering in the soil. A small gold locket, one she hadn't seen in years. Inside was a photo, Michael and Eleanor smiling, and behind it, another photo, folded small. Michael and Clara, younger, carefree, unaware of the decades their choices would echo through. Eleanor closed the locket gently. "I forgive you, Michael," she whispered, "but I'll never forget."
The house felt different after Emily left. Quieter, but not empty. For the first time in years, the silence didn't ache, it breathed. Eleanor moved slowly through the hallway, touching the photographs on the wall as if greeting old friends. Her life, decades of moments frozen in silver frames, each one now holding a new meaning. That night, she sat in her armchair beside the fireplace, a cup of tea growing cold beside her. The fire crackled softly, its warmth flickering across her face lined with years and memory. She reached for her journal, the one she had started after Michael's death but never finished. Tonight, she opened it to a blank page. "To whoever finds this," she began, her handwriting shaky but determined. "I've carried a secret for most of my life, not of what was done to me, but of how I let it define me." Her pen moved slowly, the sound of each stroke blending with the soft hiss of the fire. Michael was a good man who made a terrible mistake. Clara was a kind woman who loved him in the wrong way, and I was a woman too proud to forgive either of them. She paused, tears clouding her vision. If love is truly unconditional, then forgiveness must be the proof of it. I see that now, 40 years too late. She wrote until the clock struck midnight. The house was still. Outside, snow began to fall, soft, white, and endless, covering the garden where the letters lay buried beneath the roses. When her hand finally stopped, she set the pen down and smiled faintly. "I think that's enough," she whispered. In the morning, the mailman noticed her front door slightly open. He called out, no answer. Inside, Eleanor sat peacefully in her chair, a blanket over her knees, her journal resting on her lap. The teacup beside her had gone cold, but her face, calm, serene, looked as though she'd just made peace with the world. Weeks later, Emily returned to the little house. She'd received a letter addressed to her, the handwriting familiar now. It read, "Dear Emily, thank you for bringing me the truth I needed to hear. I want you to have something. In my garden, beneath the rose bushes, you'll find a tin box. Inside are 2 letters, one from your mother and one from me. They belong together now." Emily followed the note. The air was crisp and the ground still damp from the snow. She found the tin box exactly where Eleanor said it would be. Inside were the 2 letters and the gold locket, shining faintly in the sunlight. She opened it and smiled through tears. The 2 photos, Michael with both women, side by side, no longer hidden in separate lives. She placed the locket around her neck and whispered, "They're all at peace now." As she turned to leave, a soft breeze rustled the roses behind her. One single petal broke free, drifting to the ground like a quiet goodbye. The camera would fade here, the voiceover soft, reflective. Some stories don't end when the people do. They live on, in the forgiveness we give too late, and in the love we finally learn to understand. Then, silence. Just the wind and the sound of a rose petal falling on the snow.